Tundalabi sat in the dim glow of his laptop, the clock on his wall blinking past midnight again. Empty coffee cups surrounded him like trophies of sleepless nights. For weeks, he'd been building the biggest presentation of his career, a ₦1 million pitch for Telewave Communications, one of the largest telecom giants in Africa. Every slide, every word, every design had his sweat in it. This pitch wasn't just a project. It was his shot at finally being seen, finally getting the credit he'd worked so hard for at Skyline Advertising. But behind that drive sat one fear, his boss Bode Falana. Bode was charming on the surface, always smiling, always shaking hands, but everyone at the office knew his game. He had a bad habit of stealing ideas and claiming them as his own. Tund had seen him do it to others before, bright young talents crushed before they even got noticed. Still, this time felt different. This idea was too good, too bold to be stolen quietly. As Tund reviewed his slides again, his best friend and colleague, Ifani, leaned over his desk and said, "Bro, record everything this time. That man doesn't play fair." Tund looked up, a tired but confident smile tugging at his lips. "Don't worry," he said, closing his laptop with a soft click. "I've got a plan this time." The city lights of Lagos blinked through his office window as he whispered to himself, "This pitch will change everything, one way or another." The conference room at Telewave Communications buzzed with quiet excitement. It was pitch day, the big one. Tund sat near the back, his laptop closed, his heart pounding as his boss, Bode Falana, stepped confidently to the front. Dressed in his tailored navy blue suit and expensive cologne, Bode looked every bit the charming executive he pretended to be. He smiled at the clients, adjusted his tie, and began the presentation. Within seconds, Tund felt his stomach drop. Every word, every slide, every story, it was his. His ideas, his sleepless nights, his strategy. Bode didn't even bother to change a single line. The bold campaign concept, the tagline that Tund had spent hours perfecting, the data insights, all stolen word for word. The Telewave board nodded along, clearly impressed. Their CEO clapped his hands at the end, saying, "Brilliant thinking, Mr. Falana. This could be a game changer for our brand." Cameras flashed. Hands were shaken. Everyone in the room was congratulating Bode for what they believed was his genius. Tund sat there, frozen in his chair, forcing a polite smile as his chest burned with quiet rage. His fingers dug into his palm beneath the table. Ifani glanced at him from across the room, eyes wide, silently asking, "Are you okay?" But Tund didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stared at Bode, who was now beaming and cracking jokes with the investors. When the meeting ended, Bode strutted out like a celebrity. "We did it," he shouted to the team, lifting a glass of champagne in the hallway. The deal had closed, and with it came a massive commission. Tund knew exactly how much. Enough to change someone's life, but it wouldn't be his. Later that night, the office was empty except for Bode and Tund. Bode leaned against Tund's desk, swirling a glass of whiskey, the smell filling the air. He grinned and said, "Good work, boy. You're learning how this business works." He patted Tund's shoulder like he was doing him a favor, then walked off humming to himself. Tund just sat there, staring at the floor. His jaw tightened, his heart pounding louder with every breath. He thought about the countless nights he'd stayed in the office, missing dinners, skipping sleep, believing that hard work would speak for itself. But in Skyline Advertising, hard work didn't talk, power did. He looked at his computer screen, where the original pitch file still sat, time-stamped, named, and backed up. Slowly, a small, dangerous smile crept across his face. "Enjoy it while it lasts, sir," he whispered under his breath. "Because this time, you stole from the wrong person." Outside, Lagos shimmered with city lights and distant honking. Inside, Tund sat in the quiet glow of his computer screen, the storm inside him no longer just anger, but purpose. The heist was perfect, yes, but so was his plan for revenge. That night, long after everyone had left the office, Tund sat alone with his laptop open, the blue light reflecting off his tired eyes. The same contract Bode had given him weeks ago stared back from the screen, the so-called standard NDA and ownership agreement. Back then, Bode had handed it to him casually, saying, "Just formality, my boy. Company policy. Sign it so we can move forward." Tund remembered smiling, pretending to read it like a loyal employee. But he had read every line twice. And then, quietly, he had added one small digital clause, buried deep inside the fine print. Something Bode would never notice, because he never read paperwork. The clause was simple but deadly. All creative materials remain property of the original author unless financial transfer is documented and signed by both parties. It looked like legal jargon, the kind people skip over. But that one line would change everything, because Bode never signed the second page, the one that finalized the ownership transfer. In his arrogance, he'd only signed the cover page and sent it back. Tund had the metadata, the timestamps, and the version history to prove it. He scrolled through the document again, zooming in on the unsigned section, the empty digital signature box glowing faintly like a silent witness. A small, satisfied smirk crept across his face. "Checkmate," he whispered. As he leaned back in his chair, memories of the presentation flashed in his mind. Bode standing proudly in front of Telewave's executive, stealing his words, his vision, his future. The same man who had told him, "You're learning how this business works." Well, yes, Tund had learned, just not the way Bode expected. He opened his folder labeled Pitch Files and began sorting through his backups. The draft documents, voice memos, design sketches, and brainstorming notes. Everything was time-stamped and stored safely on both his laptop and cloud drive. He had even kept the screen recording from the day he first shared his ideas with Bode. Every piece of evidence was ready, waiting for the perfect moment. For the first time in weeks, Tund felt calm. The anger that had been boiling inside him was replaced by something colder: control. The kind of control that comes when you know you've already won, but no one else does yet. He looked out his apartment window at the Lagos skyline, glowing under the night sky. The city never slept, and neither did ambition. Let him enjoy the spotlight, Tund murmured, closing his laptop. He just signed his own downfall, or didn't sign it, rather. He chuckled softly, standing up and stretching his back. The trap was set. The documents were ready. The game had officially begun. And this time, Tund wasn't just the employee behind the idea. He was the author of Bode Falana's undoing. Tund spent the next few nights quietly building his case, piece by piece. He sat at his small desk, the hum of his laptop filling the silence of his apartment. Every click of the mouse felt like a step toward justice. He opened his Google Drive, scrolling through hundreds of saved drafts, each one time-stamped, each one proof that he was the real creator of the Telewave pitch. The earliest version sat there like a silent witness, created weeks before Bode had even looked at it. He smiled faintly and began downloading everything: the drafts, the slides, the mind maps, and even the rejected mock-ups. Every idea, every version had his name in the metadata. No one could fake that. Then he opened the voice memos on his phone, recordings from late-night brainstorming sessions with Afani. Their voices echoed softly through his headphones. "What if we call it Connect the Future?" "That's it, bro. That's the tagline." The same tagline Bode had proudly presented to Telewave. Tund paused, letting the anger wash over him one last time, then pushed it aside. Anger wouldn't win this battle. Proof would. Next, he opened his email inbox and searched for every message exchanged between him and Bode about the campaign. There they were, dozens of emails showing him as the original thinker. He took screenshots, organized them chronologically, and labeled them clearly: initial concept, draft stage, final version. Hours turned into dawn, but he didn't stop. He created a new folder on his desktop titled The Real Pitch and carefully placed all the evidence inside: time-stamped files, recordings, screenshots, and the unsigned contract. He even backed it up on 2 external drives and a secure cloud account. By the time he finished, the sun had started rising over Lagos, casting a golden hue across the skyline. Tund leaned back, exhausted but strangely calm. Everything was now in place. The truth was sitting right there, locked and ready, waiting for the perfect moment to explode. Meanwhile, on TV, Bode Falana was becoming a mini-celebrity. Tund watched from his couch as a morning show aired a segment titled The Genius Behind Telewave's New Vision. There he was, Bode, sitting confidently in his tailored suit, smiling at the cameras, taking full credit for work that wasn't his. "I believe creativity is about leadership," Bode said smoothly, waving his hand like a philosopher. "My team looks to me for direction. I inspire them." Tund let out a low laugh. "Direction," he muttered. "You stole the map." He didn't switch off the TV. He didn't post anything online. He didn't even tell Afani what he was planning. No, silence was part of the strategy. He watched Bode climb higher, interview after interview, enjoying the fame he thought he'd earned. Because Tund knew something Bode didn't: the higher a thief climbs, the harder the fall. And when it came, everyone would see who the real genius truly was. Tund waited for the right moment. Not too soon, not too late. He needed Bode to be at the top of his pride before shaking the ground beneath him. One quiet evening, with the city lights of Lagos flickering outside his window, he opened his laptop and began typing a new email. But this time, it wasn't from his regular account. He created a fresh one, under a calm, anonymous name: Whistling. No photo, no signature, no trace back to him. He attached everything: the unsigned contract, the time-stamped drafts from Google Drive, the voice memos, and the screenshots of email exchanges. Every piece of evidence was neatly labeled and zipped into one folder titled Proof of Intellectual Property Theft, Confidential. In the email body, he kept it short and professional. To the legal department, please review the attached materials regarding ownership of the Telewave pitch recently presented by Mr. Bode Falana. All evidence is time-stamped and verifiable. Whistling, he hovered over the send button for a long moment, heart pounding. Then he exhaled slowly and clicked. The email whooshed off into the digital world, quiet but deadly. Now, all he had to do was wait. Within days, whispers began circling the office. Telewave's board had launched a quiet internal investigation. Their legal department requested access to the original project files from Skyline Advertising, citing inconsistencies in authorship. Bode brushed it off with his usual arrogance, laughing it away in meetings. Just standard protocol, he told his team, waving his gold wristwatch. These corporate people love paperwork. He didn't have a clue. A few days later, Bode threw a lavish party at Eco Hotel to celebrate the success of his Telewave deal. The place was glowing, expensive suits, champagne towers, flashing cameras. Influencers were tagging him on Instagram with captions like #CreativeKing and #VisionaryLeader. He basked in it all, the music loud and his ego louder. Tund wasn't there. He sat quietly on his apartment balcony, far from the noise, watching the city's night sky sparkle. From his view, he could see the faint glimmer of fireworks above the hotel, bright bursts of color painting the sky, fading as quickly as they appeared. He sipped his coffee slowly, a faint smile on his face. He imagined Bode down there, smiling for photos, clueless that his empire was already cracking beneath his feet. The investigation would reach him soon enough, the claws, the files, the truth. Tund leaned back, the Lagos breeze brushing against his face. The fireworks exploded one last time, painting the sky gold. He raised his cup slightly and whispered to the night, "Happy downfall, sir." Then he closed his eyes, calm and content. The plan was in motion, and there was no stopping it now. Silence had done what anger never could. A week later, Skyline Advertising was buzzing with tension. Rumors had spread like wildfire. Telewave Communications had officially announced an internal review into the ownership of the Telewave pitch. Emails had been flying back and forth all morning, and everyone could feel that something big was coming. Bode Falana, however, still acted like a man untouchable. He laughed loudly in the hallway, flashing his gold watch and telling anyone who'd listen, "They're just doing their due diligence. It'll blow over." But it didn't blow over. On Friday morning, Tund received a formal invitation to a meeting at Telewave's headquarters. The subject line was simple, project ownership inquiry. He read it once, twice, then calmly put on his neatly pressed shirt and navy blue jacket. This was it. When he arrived, the conference room was already filled. Telewave's top executives, 2 lawyers, a few board members, and Bode himself, sitting confidently at the far end with a smug grin. "Ah, Tund," he said, pretending to be friendly. "Don't worry, this is just a small mix-up." Tund said nothing. He just took his seat and folded his hand. The meeting began formally. One of the lawyers, a sharp woman with glasses perched low on her nose, started projecting documents onto the large screen. "We have reviewed the materials provided to us," she began, her voice calm and we found several discrepancies between the official records and the internal project data. Bode straightened in his chair, his smile faltering just a little. "Discrepancies," he repeated. "That's impossible." The lawyer clicked to the next slide. On the screen appeared a scanned image of the contract, the same one Bode had given Tund weeks ago. Highlighted in yellow was the quiet little clause Tund had inserted. "All creative materials remain property of the original author unless financial transfer is documented and signed by both parties." Then came the next slides, time-stamped Google Drive drafts, audio clips from brainstorming sessions, and email chains where Tund's name appeared as the original creator. Each piece of evidence built on the last like bricks in a wall. The room grew heavy with silence. The only sound was the clicking of the projector. Finally, the Telewave CEO leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "Mr. Falana," he said slowly, "it seems you've violated intellectual property law." Bode's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked from the CEO to the lawyers, then to Tund, who was still sitting quietly, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, the 2 men locked eyes. No shouting, no revenge speech, just a silent exchange that said everything. Tund's calm gaze said, "You did this to yourself." The meeting ended with Telewave's management thanking Tund for his cooperation. Bode, once the loudest man in the room, walked out in stunned silence. His empire had just cracked, and all it took was the truth finally speaking for itself. By Monday morning, the story was everywhere. What had started as whispers in the office turned into a full-blown storm across social media. Headlines flooded Twitter, LinkedIn, and business blogs. Skyline director exposed for stealing employees' work. Telewave scandal. Creative theft rocks advertising industry. Screenshots of documents and meeting reports were being shared online, with everyone talking about how Bode Falana had been caught red-handed taking credit for his employee's idea. Memes, jokes, and hashtags followed. Within hours, the man once known as the genius of Skyline, became the most criticized name in Nigerian corporate circles. At Skyline's office, chaos reigned. Clients began calling nonstop, some demanding explanations, others terminating their contracts altogether. The company's PR team was scrambling to manage the fallout, but the damage was already done. Bode's name had become poison to the brand. When Bode finally showed up that morning, the confident smile was gone. His eyes were sunken, his usual swagger replaced by panic. As he walked past employees, whispers followed him like a shadow. He tried to bark orders, but no one listened. Not even his assistant looked him in the eye. By noon, HR summoned him for a disciplinary meeting. It lasted less than 15 minutes. When he came out, his face was pale and sweaty. Security escorted him to clear his desk. The same man who had strutted through the office just days ago now walked out with his belongings in a small box, a career destroyed by greed. Outside, journalists were already waiting. Cameras flashed as he tried to cover his face and rushed to his car. The video went viral within hours, the mighty Bode Falana, exposed and humiliated. Meanwhile, Tun sat quietly at his desk, keeping his focus on work. He didn't post anything online. He didn't gloat. He didn't even bring it up with his colleagues. But everyone noticed. His calmness spoke louder than any words. Some employees came by his desk, pretending to ask questions but really just wanting to say, "We're proud of you, bro." Even Ifani grinned at him from across the room, whispering, "Nah, you be the real boss now." That afternoon, Ms. Aisha Bello, the head of HR, stopped by his office. She closed the door behind her and smiled warmly. "Tund," she said softly, "I've worked here for 10 years. I've seen people come and go, but no one handled a storm like you just did." Tund smiled humbly. "I just wanted the truth to come out." Aisha nodded, leaning forward. "You didn't just survive, Tund. You outsmarted him." When she left, Tund finally allowed himself a quiet breath of relief. The storm was over. Bode's empire had collapsed, not with shouting or revenge, but with silence, patience, and proof. Outside, Lagos carried on, cars honking, life moving fast. But for Tund, the noise had faded. He had won his freedom, his respect, and his name back, all in one move. A few days after the scandal, Tund received a formal email from Telewave's executive team. The subject line read, "Project Leadership Opportunity." He opened it carefully, scanning the message. Telewave was offering him the chance to lead the campaign he had originally created, this time directly, with full creative control, a generous contract, and recognition in his name. Every detail he had fought for, every sleepless night, every careful step, was finally being acknowledged. Tund leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. Part of him wanted to jump up, to celebrate, to call Ifani and tell him everything had paid off. But another part stayed quiet. This wasn't just about victory anymore. It was about responsibility. Could he step into a position of leadership at such a massive company? Could he trust that this time, he wouldn't be undermined or sidelined? He remembered his mother in Ibadan, always calm, always wise. When he was a boy and faced bullies or unfair situations, she would say, "Never fight a fool in public. Let truth be your witness." Those words echoed in his mind now. He had followed her advice, letting the evidence speak instead of anger or confrontation. And it had worked. Tund took a deep breath and picked up the contract. He read it carefully, line by line. This was different from the last time. Every clause was fair, every term transparent, every signature space accounted for. This wasn't just a job offer. It was a recognition of his talent, integrity, and patience. He closed his eyes and imagined himself walking into the Telewave boardroom, this time as the leader, not the shadow behind the idea. He pictured guiding a team, shaping the campaign exactly as he envisioned it, and finally being credited for his work. A proud smile spread across his face. Then he picked up a pen and signed the contract. In that moment, he felt a mix of humility and triumph. The fight was over, but the reward wasn't just money or title. It was respect. It was the knowledge that he had done it the right way. Before leaving his apartment, Tund sent a quick message to his mother. "I did it, Ma. I kept your words." Truth won. Outside, Lagos hummed with life, indifferent to individual victory. But for Tund, the city felt brighter, alive with possibility. He was ready to lead, to create, and to shine, not for revenge, not for fame, but because he had earned it honestly. And in the quiet of his office later that evening, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "This one's for you, Ma." The words carried more weight than any headline or social media post ever could. It was a victory of patience, integrity, and truth, a redemption earned the right way. Months had passed since the Telewave scandal, and life for Tund had changed completely. He was no longer just the employee whose ideas had been stolen. He was the creative director of his own firm, a lobby concept. The small office on the top floor of a Lagos building buzzed with energy, laughter, and creativity. Walls were lined with storyboards, mood boards, and motivational quotes. Young designers, strategists, and marketers moved around, pitching ideas, sketching concepts, and collaborating freely. Tund had made it a point to hire talent who had been overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed in the corporate world, just like he once had been. He believed that everyone deserved a chance to shine without someone taking credit for their hard work. Each day, he watched his team grow, their confidence blossom, and their creativity soar. He felt proud, not just of the company he had built, but of the safe space he had created for people to thrive. One rainy afternoon, Tund's phone rang. The caller ID flashed an unfamiliar number. He answered, and a familiar, desperate voice greeted him. "Hello, is this Tund Alabi? It's Bode Falana. I'm looking for freelance work. I heard your firm is hiring, and I thought maybe you could use me." Tund's hand froze on the phone for a moment. The man who had once stolen his work, ruined his peace, and humiliated him now sounded small, almost pitiful. He could feel the old anger bubble up, but he quickly pushed it aside. Years of patience, strategy, and focus had taught him the power of calm. He took a slow breath and replied evenly, almost kindly. "Mr. Falana, I don't hold grudges. Send your portfolio." There was a brief pause, then a quiet thank you before the call ended. Tund set the phone down and stared at it. He thought about the journey, the stolen pitch, the long nights, the evidence, the exposure, and finally the rise. Then, almost instinctively, he opened his email and deleted the message. Not out of malice, but out of principle. The past was gone. Bode's opportunity to prove himself, if there even was one, wouldn't be through Tund's hand. Tund had built his success honestly and intentionally. His future didn't need old ghosts cluttering it. He turned back to his team, who were laughing over a new storyboard, full of ideas and energy. Tund smiled, a deep, quiet smile. He had returned to the top, not by fighting or seeking revenge, but by creating a space where talent, honesty, and integrity mattered most. Outside, Lagos was alive with rain-soaked lights and traffic, but inside Alabi Concepts, there was calm, focus, and hope. Tund looked around his office, at the young faces full of promise, and whispered softly, "This is why I do it. Not for revenge, but for the future." And with that, he got back to work, letting the city hum and the past fade behind. Tund sat at his desk in his new office, the Lagos skyline stretching endlessly outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city lights flickered like stars as dusk settled over the bustling streets below. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, a mixture of relief, pride, and satisfaction. After years of struggle, betrayal, and careful planning, he had built something truly his own. He picked up his phone and started recording a short video for his team at Alabi Concepts. His voice was calm but firm, filled with the wisdom of experience. "Never let anyone take your light," he said, looking directly into the camera. "Document your work. Protect your ideas. Silence is power. Patience and proof will always speak louder than anger or noise." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in, imagining each young designer and strategist in his office watching and learning from his advice. The message was simple, but it carried the weight of everything he had endured. As he ended the recording, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Telewave's CEO. "Congratulations, Mr. Alabi. The campaign just went global." Tund leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. The months of careful planning, the sleepless nights, the quiet strategy, it had all paid off. He looked out at Lagos again, the city alive and moving, unaware of the quiet victories taking place in offices like his. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "And that's how I used his own contract to destroy him." The words hung in the air, a private acknowledgement of justice done. Tund turned back to the glowing skyline, feeling the thrill of success, but more importantly, the satisfaction of knowing he had achieved it honestly, strategically, and without losing himself in the process. The future was his, bright, limitless, and earned the right way.